You've taken the same approach with the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. You have taken the same approach to actually investigate what is the scribe doing. And in Hebrew Matthew, chapter 5, verse 4, we see it in a powerful way.
Now, before we get to 5:4, we'll get to that in the plus. I don't think we're going to get to it now. I got to explain these two groups. We have group A and we have group B. And remember, group B, let's see, is it group? Yeah, group B doesn't have verses 3 and 5.
Right.
And so all of this was to explain why it is they don't have verse 3 and 5, and there's two explanations. I didn't even get to the second explanation. The first explanation is that maybe there's an error that the scribe was copying, and it says Ashrei 7 times. 7 verses in a row begin Ashrei, 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 Ashrei. And in the Greek, it's 2 more. Maybe the original Hebrew had all 9 verses, and verses 6 and 7 that we'll get to in a future episode, maybe they were lost by homoio arcton, the similar beginning with haplography, that is, it was lost. Okay, so that's possibility number 1. The verses were lost, that when he saw the word Ashrei, his eye skipped. Instead of copying verse 3, he skipped to what he thought was the next word to copy, but it was verse 4. And then he did it again and copied verse 8 instead of verse 5. Or actually, it's backwards, meaning we have verse 3 followed by verse 5 followed by verse 4 in the group B manuscripts. So that's possibility number 1, that the original Hebrew had all 9 or possibly 7 of these Ashrei verses, of the blessed be verses, Makarioi verses, and that 2 or 4 of them were lost. That's possibility number 1. What's possibility number 2? Possibility number 2 is kind of obvious, is that the group B manuscripts have the original Hebrew Matthew, and that Hebrew Matthew originally was what just didn't have 4 of the verses that the Greek Matthew has. And that somebody came along and said, wait a minute, there's missing verses here. We've got to add them. We've got to add them in from the Greek or from the Latin or whatever they were using, right? And that they translated them from the Latin and the Greek into Hebrew. That's possibility number 2. And what suggests that as a strong possibility? I lean towards that possibility, but I don't know, right? How can I know? I lean towards that possibility because in group B manuscripts, where they do have verses 3 and 5, verse 5 comes before verse 4. And we have this idea in textual criticism. It's a very common thing in the study of manuscripts that originally something is written in the margin, and later another scribe comes along and writes it in the body of the text, and he doesn't exactly know where to put it, so he puts it in the wrong place. In other words, let's imagine this scenario. Originally, Hebrew Matthew has verse 2, verse 4, followed by verse 8. And between verses 2 and 8, there is 1 verse. So verse 3 isn't there, verse 5 isn't there, verse 6 isn't there, and verse 7 isn't there. Maybe that's what the original Hebrew Matthew had. I'm not saying that's what Yeshua said in the Sermon on the Mount. We have the Greek testimony of Matthew, and we have the Greek testimony of Luke chapter 6, right? We have 2 other testimonies. But maybe the original Hebrew Matthew had jumped from verse 2 to verse 4 to verse 8, and maybe that's how it originally was written. And then a scribe comes along and says, wait a minute, I know there's more in the Sermon on the Mount. I don't remember everything. And he goes and he looks in Greek or in whatever he had, and he writes verses 3 and 5 in the margin. And then in another phase, now phase 3, verse 3 is put where it belongs the next time the manuscript is copied, but doesn't exactly know where to put verse 5, so he puts it after 4. Okay? That's scenario number 2. And I really have no way of knowing which of these took place.